Welcome back to Third Saturday in October, your SEC tailgate podcast for the rest of us. I'm Tennessee Bradley. With me is Alabama Chris, and we are getting ready to talk about just kind of some post-op for SEC Media Days. But before we get there, let me remind you, go to thirdsaturdaynoctober.com where you can get links to all of our social media profiles. You can also get our tailgating tips right there on the homepage. So go check that out. You can also get a link to YouTube where we broadcast the podcast. Alabama Chris, are you psyched for SEC football?
Man, Media Days is now a distant memory. The season is rapidly approaching. I am so pumped, man. We were in August and again, the Delta variant is now raging, which may cause issues. But right now, I'm looking at a full slate of games, a full season where we're not just playing the SEC. And as much as I love just SEC play last year, I'm excited to get back to a typical season, especially one for Alabama, where somehow last year, our last game of the season was not playing the Auburn Tigers. So I'm pumped. I'm ready. How about you, buddy?
Yes, I'm very excited. We got to do what every media outlet does. We have to give our preseason rankings. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's,
can I mention before we dive into that, just like how many other podcasts that you can listen to or YouTube shows that you can watch, can you go to their website and download tailgating tips that come with actual recipes for you to put into your Saturday food rotation? I think it's pretty cool. I think everybody should go there, download those recipes, try them out for yourself, and see if we have the ultimate tailgating recipes or if you have a favorite, and argue with us. Let us know, because we'd love to change our minds based on the fact that you guys have a better buffalo wing recipe or hamburger recipe. So bring it on, baby.
Oh,
just saying.
I'm not saying my recipe for wings is the best. I'm just saying it might be the easiest, which is what I'm about when I'm cooking. So let's dive into our rankings. Chris, you want to start in the East or you want to start in the West?
I mean, let's start in the East. I feel like that if you just look at a map and you're going west to east, like you read a book, you kind of read going left from right, that the West would always get that first come, first love. So let's do the East this year.
Well, and if you're going alphabetically, East comes before West, even though you've got three teams in the West that alphabetically land before the first team in the East. So I'll start with the East. I think Florida wins the East. JT Daniels was showing a lot of promise at the end of the year. Florida loses a lot of firepower on offense. Georgia's going to have a good defense with Kirby Smart. Kind of like even when Alabama was getting torched, was it in 2019? Because, their starting linebacker got hurt preseason. You knew their defense was still going to be pretty solid. I think the same thing with Kirby Smart and his defenses. So I think Georgia is going to be good on offense, good on defense. Maybe not the best in both, but the best combination of both. Then I've got Florida just because they've got a lot of talent on their roster, though who's going to be their quarterback, I don't know. Third, I've got Kentucky. They bring in a new offensive coordinator. They want to have a more dynamic offense with more passing. So I think that combined with they've had a stout defense for quite a while. They've given Florida fits for quite a while. And I think things are coming together where they're in that top tier, at least for this year in the SEC. Then I've got Missouri as 4. They came on late last year. Not sure how things shake up with turnover, but I think they end up at 4. Sometimes they have good streaks, but they haven't been able to like not have a road bump somewhere, whether it's early or late. So I see them at 4, Tennessee at 5. Unless Coach Heupel just comes out and he's worked serious magic in the quarterback room to get the offense all on the same page. Man, I don't know that we're putting up 500 yards a game this year, maybe in a year or two, but I think you're going to see, especially the first half of the season, things kind of getting worked out. So I have them at 5th, just before South Carolina at 6th and Vanderbilt at 7th. It's just, those can probably be flip-flopped. I don't know that how much I trust either head coach at Coach Beamer at South Carolina or Coach Lee at Vanderbilt. I don't know enough about them. So we'll see. So again, the East: Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, Missouri, Tennessee, South Carolina, Vanderbilt. That's how I have my East shaping up. Chris, any thoughts on that?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I had a little different order in the East for myself. But the bottom half seemed to be, or at least the bottom section, I feel like is pretty lockstep. So I've got Georgia winning the East, then Florida, then Missouri, then the Vols, Tennessee Volunteers. Then coming in 5th, I've got the Wildcats of Kentucky, and then South Carolina, and then the Commodores coming in last place. And I agree. It feels like that as much as South Carolina and Vanderbilt seem to struggle on a yearly basis anyway over there in the East, that now having 2 new coaches, 2 new systems, everybody trying to get on the same page there. I hope for some improvement in distant seasons, but this season, I think that 6th and 7th is about as good as you can hope.
So no love for
I'm
Kentucky.
Interested. Yeah. I mean, as much as, again, there's a little bit of my recency bias happening there with Kentucky, or maybe the historical perspective of Kentucky. Like they always have some hope, but never really like break through into that top tier, at least looking at it. But you put them in 3rd, right?
I put them at 3rd. I mean, last year they beat Tennessee. Did they finish? They may have finished 4th last year because I think
you're
it was
right.
Georgia, Florida, and then Missouri and Kentucky. I can't remember which order. But Stoops is the 2nd longest tenured coach in the SEC, behind only your Nick Saban.
Wow.
So he's been able to succeed enough at a basketball school to keep his job.
Right.
Also, I see him making some changes to be more dynamic on offense without sacrificing his defense. So I see room for them to move up the ladder a rung. But still, Georgia, Florida, it's hard to argue with that. And then, I mean, it is a step down for the rest. So we'll see. We'll have to revisit this at the end of the season. We should come in and about halfway through and see how our picks have been going at the halfway point, and then ultimately revisit it at the end of the season too, because there's always something that's a shakeup. Like, I didn't know this would happen, whether it be an injury or a standout player that we're not even talking about at this point in the preseason. So yeah, man, it's going to be fun in the SEC East this year. Yeah. So let's go to the West. Chris, run us through your West, how you think it's going to shake out.
All right. And I will go opposite of what you did. I'll start at the number 7 spot, which for me this year are going to be the Arkansas Razorbacks. It's funny to be at this position now in year 3 doing this show with you. I've become more of a fan of all of the teams in the SEC. And so part of me knows that, like, my ultimate fandom is in Alabama in the West, and then with the Vols in the East. That's where I have my ultimate allegiance. But the more I get to know the players on all these teams, the more that I get to hear from the coaches, trying to report on it from a level playing field. I have love for a lot of these teams and a lot of these coaches specifically, especially knowing their personalities more. So it's hard to put Arkansas there at the end, because I want Coach Pittman and the Razorbacks to like really succeed, but they're playing in the SEC West, so that is a difficult place to play. So I have them coming in seventh. For sixth, I've got Mike Leach and the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Again, I think that there is a lot of potential for the Bulldogs to make some big moves, but towards the top of the SEC West, it's just such a juggernaut. As you know, trying to eke your way into the top four or even the top three is pretty difficult to do. Which is why, even though one of my favorite coaches these days, not long-term favorite coaches, but he's really grown on me these last few years. I've got Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss coming in at fifth place. Again, as much as I would like to see them move up as maybe fourth or even third, I've got them at fifth. I've got the Auburn Tigers coming in at number four. I've got a lot of hope for the Tigers, even though they're my biggest rival. It looks like that what Brian Harsin is doing there, at least from a culture standpoint, at least from what they have coming back from last year, I think that they have some potential. But again, when you have the LSU Tigers and Alabama and the Texas A&M Aggies in your same conference, man, that's going to be really difficult to break through. So for the third spot, I've got the LSU Bayou Bengals or the LSU Tigers. You know, as much as I feel like that they are going to improve on last year, it's going to be difficult to break through. And I feel like the Aggies and Bama are poised to have great seasons, not just good seasons, but great seasons, which brings me to my top two. And this is difficult, again, with the idea that Alabama has, perennially is going to be a favorite, but to know what they have lost and to watch them, like, as much as I'm their biggest fan when I'm looking at all these teams, I'm also a big critic of Alabama. And I pay the closest attention to them where it comes to injuries and reloading kind of thing. And so I know that as much as Bryce Young making probably over $1 million at this point in NIL deals, he is still unproven. So it's going to be difficult. And Alabama lost a lot to the draft, but now really comparing the Aggies and the Crimson Tide, the Aggies lost a lot too. They lost their offensive line. It's been decimated. They also are going to be starting a new quarterback this year. So because of that, I've got the Aggies coming in second, but a close second. And I think that it's going to probably the game of the year, especially in the SEC West, if not arguably in the whole of the SEC, is going to be that Week 5 matchup between the Crimson Tide and the Texas A&M Aggies. I think that that's going to show a lot as to who's going to be riding into Atlanta at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the championship, the SEC championship. So running them back over, I've got Arkansas coming in seventh, and then the Mississippi State Bulldogs. We got Ole Miss coming in fifth, Auburn Tigers fourth, LSU third, Texas A&M Aggies at number two, and then my beloved Crimson Tide coming in number one. But that doesn't mean that I'm overwhelmingly blown away by what I'm seeing so far with Alabama. I think that this is a year where that there could be some movement in the SEC West. That it's not a guarantee Alabama goes into the SEC championship unfazed and unbeaten because there's a lot to play for, and this may be wrapping up the last season that we see a 14-team SEC roster because there may be some additions coming soon. But I'm curious for you, SEC West, any arguments, any placement differences that you would have than what I just did?
Yeah. So going from bottom to top, I've got Mississippi State coming in last. I basically flipped Mississippi State and Arkansas because the culture, the drive that I saw in Arkansas led by Sam Pittman last year has me moving them up from last place. So Mississippi State, Arkansas, then I've got LSU. Bad year last year.
Number 5.
How do they rebound from that? I don't know. They lost their tight end to the transfer portal, and they lost a quarterback to the transfer portal, I believe. So quarterback is still undecided. Then I've got Auburn.
Yeah, that injury at quarterback, and yeah. Okay.
So Auburn in fourth, we're the same there. Mississippi State and Arkansas flipped. LSU drops to fifth. So Auburn fourth. I've got Ole Miss in third. I saw I saw Lane Kiffin, that offensive mind. Probably, everybody talked about Mike Leach, being the pirate, bringing in this offense that can't be stopped or something. Playing out in the Pac-12, can you really you can't really recruit like the SEC. I don't know. I don't think it's going to work. So I've got Ole Miss because Lane Kiffin studied under Nick Saban. You saw him last year pick apart Alabama's defense, and I mean, it was a shooting match till the end. So with a second year of working with Matt Corral, things could be special in Oxford. I don't know that they're going to be special enough to get them to Atlanta, but I think they're going to surprise some people. And then step with you, A&M in second, Alabama in first. So I think it's going to be Alabama and Georgia in the SEC championship game. I think the SEC championship game is going to be another classic game between Alabama and Georgia. I just don't know that Nick Saban's ready to be beat by one of his former assistants yet. As good as JT Daniels and I expect Georgia on defense to be, I don't know that they keep pace with Alabama. Nick Saban's ability to reload, no matter how much talent he's lost, is something that I still can't bet against.
Yeah, and I agree. It's just there's so many question marks right now. I think that this year's Alabama defense is going to be pretty stout. But some of the question marks I have for the Crimson Tide on the offense right now, because they've had to reload so much, and several of the people that they're reloading for were in New York City, or at least in the Heisman race last year. I know that it was a little different with COVID and not being able to be as in person, but with those question marks, it's hard right now from a preseason perspective to really say that Alabama is going to be as dominant in previous years. But I definitely think that they have the potential. Always with Nick Saban at the helm, you're going to be dangerous, regardless of if it's a national championship season or not. It's still going to be a good season, I believe. Now, just a quick point of clarification. I thought you said earlier that Florida was your pick for the East. Did I mishear that?
Yeah. Georgia is number one, Florida number two.
Gotcha. Okay.
Florida has a lot of talent. I just don't know how they put it together. So we'll see. But yeah, I've still got Georgia running the East this year.
Yeah. Okay. So it looks like that for me too. Georgia running the East, Alabama winning in the West, which would take them to Mercedes-Benz Stadium in December. But you're saying that it looks like that Alabama will have figured things out enough to really take it to the Bulldogs for that game.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the West will be victorious.
Yeah, I think once again, but I think it's close, and I mean, I don't know. Depending on how the rest shakes out, I can see Georgia and Alabama getting into the playoffs this year. I think it's another one of those scenarios where Georgia is that good, where even if they lose to Alabama in another close one, that Georgia still gets an invitation to the playoffs. I think they're a top 4 team in the country.
Yeah. I think that I would agree with you there. It looks like that yet another year, we're already talking about the playoffs and looking at the idea that at least 2 SEC teams could be real contenders to be in there even before anybody has snapped one play for a game here this season. Because I agree with you. It looks like that, if Alabama and or the Aggies went out in the West and the Bulldogs or the Florida Gators went out in the East, that all 4 of those teams to me are early preseason favorites to be at least maybe into the season top 10. And so to know that amount, that percentage, that ratio of the SEC is already looking for top 10 finishes, it makes a lot of sense to me, and looks like it's going to be another dangerous year in the SEC when comparing them to every other conference out there. But I know that we have news and possibilities for even as early as next year having 16 teams in the SEC, not just the 14 that we've had. It's going to be wild.
So since at SEC Media Days, rumors broke that Texas and Oklahoma wanted to join the SEC. Early that next week, the SEC has extended an offer. Texas and Oklahoma officially request or accept the offer, and then I could be getting this timeline wrong. And then by the end of the week last week, the SEC schools, I guess these are the athletic directors.
The athletic directors or presidents of the universities.
Have voted to allow A&M, Oklahoma, and Texas to join in 2025. But everybody's talking like this could be something for 2022. And what I understand the reasoning behind that is the last time the SEC extended an invitation to schools to join the SEC, it was A&M and Missouri. And they were competing in the SEC the following school year. So we're guessing that there will be some sort of a buyout. What I understand is ESPN has to buy out the Longhorn Network. That money would be paid to the Big 12 to not only buy out Texas, but also Oklahoma and get them playing in the SEC earlier. So we decided to do something with our rankings. What would they look like if Oklahoma and Texas joined for this season? How do we think things would shake out? And here is how we're kind of going to go about that. There are two options that are being discussed. Either we keep the East and West divisions, and what would happen is Alabama and Auburn would move to the East. This will keep most of the rivalries intact. Then Missouri moves to the West. Texas and Oklahoma join the West. So now you've got two conferences of 8 teams. So the new East would be Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, not Missouri. I've got that written in the wrong place.
Missouri.
South Carolina, Tennessee, Vanderbilt. So that's the new East. The new West would be Arkansas, LSU, Missouri, Mississippi, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Texas, Texas A&M. So you've got
a scary division right there.
Would you go to a 9-game season so that you got still 2 teams from the other division? Would it go to a 10-game SEC season? That was brutal last year. I don't look forward to a 10-game season. The other thing being thrown around are pods. The best way to think about pods is you've got 4 clusters of 4 teams. And the NFL is arranged like this. The AFC has the AFC South, which is the Tennessee Titans, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Houston Texans, and the Indianapolis Colts. In the NFL, you play each of those other 3 teams twice in a year. And then you play a lot of, you fill out your schedule with one NFC division. I believe you play like the whole division, so 4 teams from the NFC, and then you just kind of fill the rest in with more teams from your conference, the AFC. So the Titans would play the Colts, the Jaguars, the Texans twice every year. plus one NFC division like the NFC South, which would be, I think that's Atlanta, the Atlanta Falcons, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the New Orleans Saints, and I don't know who, probably the Carolina Panthers.
Panthers,
so they play all those teams once, and then the rest would just be filled in with other AFC teams. So you can have a pod with teams like, what I've heard proposed is Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. So all the Tennessee schools and Alabama schools in one pod. So Tennessee plays Vandy, Auburn, and Alabama every year. Plus, just you kind of throw in the other teams. It does lose things like Tennessee, Florida, Tennessee, Georgia. Maybe there's room to keep those as permanent games. Maybe they get swapped out. I wouldn't mind some of those being swapped out. But it does just kind of mess with some of those rivalry games a little bit. It's a little confusing, but the NFL has been doing it pretty well, and you get to rotate more teams more often. So Tennessee would get to play Texas A&M more often. Alabama would get to play Florida more often. Some of those things that don't always get to happen. Get to happen. So I want to go through this and look at rankings. If Texas and Oklahoma were joining the SEC this year, where would they be? And Chris, since I started with the East last time, let's go through the West. Tell me where Missouri falls in this new West. Texas and Oklahoma, where do they find their spot in the West?
So for me, if I'm looking at the West, and again, taking out Alabama and Auburn, moving Missouri over, and then adding in Oklahoma and Texas, I have Oklahoma coming in first. If we're just looking at East and West divisions, not looking at the pods at this point, I have Oklahoma coming in first year and already vying for, if not winning, the SEC West. I think that would be a pretty interesting thing, and the way that they have been playing in the last handful of years, I who will be in the West next year, or in our kind of fantasy thoughts here for this year, I say Oklahoma already winning, much like the Missouri Tigers the first year they were in, winning the SEC East, or at least they either came in first or second, I believe, that first year, which everybody expected, or at least I expected it to be the Texas A&M Aggies vying for that, to come into the SEC and really dominating quickly. But they had a bit of a slower start. But I would say Oklahoma coming in first, and then we kind of go from there. Aggies coming in second. I think that the Missouri Tigers coming in third, and then from there we've got the LSU Tigers, the Mississippi schools, and Arkansas rounding it out to end it up. What about you?
Where does Texas fall in there?
Oh, Texas. I'm sorry. I think that Texas would come in right in the middle of the pack at 4.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So I'm kind of lock in step with the top there as well. Oklahoma, I think they come in. They've shown that. I think with Alabama and Auburn kind of out of the way, I think that they could come in and be there with A&M. One of those two teams is going to win the new West. Then I've got Ole Miss, because I think Lane Kiffin comes in and improves in year 2. Then I've got Missouri. So I've got Ole Miss just a step above Missouri. Then Texas, LSU, Arkansas, Mississippi State. So that puts Texas.
That seems like a very reasonable one. Yeah.
That puts Texas in 5th in the SEC West. Yeah. And if ever there's a statement that Texas is back, it's Texas being in 5th in the SEC West. So, So let's go to the East. This is the same East that we have. Losing Missouri, gaining Alabama and Auburn. I think it's Alabama in first, Georgia second, Florida third, Kentucky fourth, right there with Auburn. The reason I put Kentucky before Auburn, Kentucky, like I said, just the second longest tenured coach. There's a reason he's still the coach. Auburn, Tennessee, South Carolina, Vanderbilt. So Auburn, Tennessee, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, all new coaches this year, rounding out the bottom half of the SEC East. I do think Auburn set up a little bit better than Tennessee as far as a talent standpoint. Just as many questions for me with Auburn's coaching staff as Tennessee's coaching staff. So coin flip, I think, there as far as how it gets, how it would all shake out there in the end. So Chris, what are your thoughts with Alabama and Auburn being in the East?
Other than me not having Kentucky as high on my list as yours, it's pretty much the same as your list there. So I've got Alabama, then Georgia, then Florida, and then where do I go from there? Then I'm putting Auburn and Tennessee more of like in that same line, with Kentucky coming in 6th, and then the Gamecocks 7th, and then the Commodores 8th.
Yeah,
coming in the last place there with Vanderbilt.
Very similar. So then you're kind of, you're 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2. How does this look? Oklahoma, Alabama. I think that would be a really good SEC championship game. Maybe not as good as Alabama, Georgia. Then you've got Texas A&M and Georgia in the 2 spot. Pretty good. Ole Miss, Florida in 3. Maybe give the edge to Florida here. So the East is now becoming the powerhouse where the West has been with Alabama, with LSU until last year, with Texas A&M coming up. Even Auburn knows how to give people fits at times.
Especially in that second half of the season. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you've got Missouri, Kentucky. Good game here. Kentucky wants to ground and pound, wants to change that up a little bit this year. Missouri likes to put up a lot of yards. Then you've got Texas, Auburn. I think that's a pretty good indication. Like, I think that's pretty even with where Texas is, even though where they think they are. I think they're right there with Auburn. LSU, Tennessee, both very disappointing seasons last year. Arkansas, South Carolina, I think edge to Arkansas here. And then Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, very interesting to see how that one shakes out as well. But I think that's very balanced. Do we just want to have 2 8-team divisions in this conference? I don't know. So moving to pods, I'm going to give my top 4 teams, because basically pods, the way it shakes out is just the two teams with the best record end up meeting in the SEC championship game. It doesn't have to be the best, the best of the East versus best of the West, because now it's basically north, south, east, and west, or however you want to divide it up. But
I feel like it would probably be divided something like that. But when I'm looking at the actual geography of how everything is laid out, it's almost like there would be a far west, a west, an east, and a far east kind of team, because they kind of line up geographically more in that line. But I don't know what you call them then. But I do like the idea of keeping it clean, like the NFL does with Northeast, South, and West.
So I would guess that Alabama is definitely one of those teams. So it comes down to the other 3. Is that maybe that's Georgia, because they've got a coach and a team that knows what it's like to go through the SEC schedule.
Sure.
Last year, that would have been Texas A&M. I don't know how you choose between, Texas A&M was 9-1 last year. If you've got 2 9-1 teams, who do you choose to play 10-0 Alabama? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think it in pods. It's Georgia or Texas A&M. It could be Oklahoma. I just don't know how Oklahoma is going to hold up to an SEC schedule. I know we've said this before. And
That's true. That's true.
A&M did pretty well. Missouri did really well. Missouri ends up in the SEC championship game their first season in the SEC.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of beginner's luck. But I don't know. So I think it's Alabama versus Georgia, A&M, or Oklahoma if we're in pods this year with new additions to the SEC.
I certainly think that those are the 4 teams, regardless of how the pods lay them out and who they play. I feel like that those are the 4 powerhouses. And then you got kind of a middle of the pack group of, I don't know, probably 6 or 8, and then the lower tier 4 coming there. But yeah, I would agree with you. Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Alabama, and Georgia seem to be that power 4 that could kind of vie for it.
And I wonder if pods make it easier to make the argument for 3 SEC teams in the playoffs. I mean, think about it. If you had a 4-team playoff between Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M, that would be a stout. I mean, last year's, if you put those 4 teams in a playoff, I think that's a really great pool. This year, I think it could still be a great pool. We'll see what happens when Oklahoma and Texas finally get here. So I don't know. It's about to get real fun. Oops, if I don't throw stuff off my desk in the meantime, I think it's about to get real fun with Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC. It's always mayhem because there's going to be a team who disappoints, LSU 2020. There's going to be a team that surprises some people. You could say second half Missouri 2020. You could say Kentucky 2020. You could say Ole Miss even. Just being able to go neck and neck, touchdown for touchdown with Alabama for 3 3/4 quarters. They just couldn't quite outlast Alabama. I don't know. Something's always going to happen in bringing in 2 schools, but also 2 fan bases like Oklahoma and Texas.
Oh my gracious. Yeah.
So now you've got obviously 3rd Saturday in October. You've got the Iron Bowl. You've got world's largest outdoor cocktail party. And soon you will have the Red River rivalry all in one conference.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
Plus Texas A&M can be renewed every year. Possibly. Arkansas gets back in there with some of their Southwest Conference foes. Look, this year's going to be fun. I can't wait for next year already. So I do think that things are going to shake out, that Texas and Oklahoma are here 1 year from now. I think they're in the SEC.
Yeah, I do too.
I think the buyouts, it's just things are going to happen. Obviously, Oklahoma and Texas don't want to be there, but it'll be fun.
Oh, yeah. And I think that the having 2 divisions still for the SEC seems like the cleanest way to divide all this up. But I feel like the pods sound like that long-term have the most potential for a lot of fun and excitement, especially, again, one of the things I was recently talking about with Texas A&M, Jimbo Fisher was saying that like every year it's the culture, the team has a new identity. And I think that is definitely true, which is difficult when then you have teams that don't even play each other but once every 10 years, like Tennessee, Texas A&M, or Alabama, South Carolina, those kinds of teams. But with the pods, you only have to play your other three teams, and then maybe the majority of maybe an East-West kind of division. But I think that you have the options of rotating out some of those other games that would be played maybe every 3 years or so. You can every 3 years, each team plays every team in the entire SEC. That would be very interesting, but I don't know how that would all work itself out theoretically starting next year. But we'll see. It's a lot of excitement, a lot of stuff for us to talk about.
Well, and speaking of things to talk about, we're shaking up a little. What we've done last year was a little different. We were all just trying to figure things out. So our field reporter segment we kind of lost it last year. We're changing things up this year. We're going to have kind of a Monday morning quarterback club, if you will. So here's how it's going to work. We're going to have our regular TSIO third Saturday in October podcast coming to you every Friday, just like you've known for the last 2 years. On Mondays, that's when we're going to be breaking down the games from the previous Saturday. So tailgate with us on Friday. Saturday, watch a lot of college football. Monday, join us for some Monday morning quarterbacks. What it's going to be is if you want to tell us in a couple minutes what your team did, tell us. You can just send us a voice memo to podcast@thirdsaturday-in-october.com. If you just want to email it to us, one of us will read it. We're happy to do that for you. Again, just email it to podcast@thirdsaturday-in-october.com. Chris will be doing a Monday morning quarterback for Alabama. I'll be doing one for Tennessee. We may just kind of wrap up the West and the East as well, respectively. But that's going to be where you get the previous week's recap. We may touch on it in the bigger podcast, but if you just want to hear from somebody about your team, or you just want to hear about next week's opponent, if I'm playing Alabama next week, you better believe I'm going to be listening to Chris's Monday morning quarterback about the week prior. I think it'll be fun. We'll see. Being a podcast, we can try anything. If it works, great. If not, we'll change it up. That's part
Absolutely.
of being I guess we're kind of co-offensive coordinators for the third Saturday in October podcast. Chris, I know I'm psyched about this. I know you've talked about you're excited about this. Fun little addition to the TSIO pod.
Yeah. And we've already talked to some folks who are going to be contributing. And so we're excited about what they're bringing, but we're excited about what you're going to be bringing as well. So if you're listening right now or watching right now and you want to be involved, if you want to be flex your journalism muscles, if you want to be a Monday morning quarterback like Bradley and I, shoot us a line, because we want to hear from you every week about your favorite team in the SEC.
Yeah. You can reach us on thirdsaturday-in-october.com. Email us podcast@thirdsaturday-in-october.com. On the website, you can also find links to all of our social media, find a link to our YouTube channel where we broadcast the podcast, and get those tailgating tips right there on the website as well. It's our look. We did a kickoff episode. We covered every team at SEC Media Days, which was a blast. I feel like I'm going into this year knowing more about every team, at least in the East, better than ever. I don't know how Tennessee's going to do, but it doesn't dampen my excitement. I am ready for SEC football 2021.
Oh, me too. Bring it on, baby. Bring on that first season or that first week.
Until next week, I just want to bid each and every one of you a roll Vols.
Roll Vols, baby.